Hey, everybody at Adventist Today. This is Lauren Seibold. I'm the executive editor of Adventist Today, and I'm here today with my friend Rita Corbett. Now, Rita and I have been talking about the project we're going to be telling you about here in a bit for quite a long time, because it's been going on for quite a while. It started out in 2016, and the project is the Hope Center in the South East Andhra Conference in India, and how that came about and what happened. Now, Rita, I recall that you were raised as a mission kid. Am I right?
Yes, that's right. I was raised in Africa, and I don't know what miracle happened, but I ended up in India, and that was just great.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of us, those of us who realize that we have more to offer than the people in some of the countries in the world have to work with. You go there and you see the needs and you want to help. So how did
Exactly.
the Hope Center come about?
Well, initially we were told that one of the things that was badly needed was buildings. The conference center called a section over there with renting buildings here and there and everywhere, people staying here and there and everywhere. They really needed a conference center. So one early building at least was put up by the division and the union, and then we proceeded with accommodations for staff and a school and a training center and landscaping and just developing the project. We didn't quite get done before we began to sense that some things were going sideways a little bit, and we didn't know what they were.
If I recall correctly, Rita, this was a project that was not just you and Grant put a lot, your husband Grant put a lot of your resources into it, but you had a group of people from your church and your community who were all pitching in and helping out and really wanted to make this a real strong evangelistic center for this section of India.
Yes, that's true. We had quite a number of helpers, including the local church and some family members, and they were all willing and happy and contributing, and understood that there would be issues that, things would come up that we would have to deal with, and we had a few of those. But then it started to fall apart or have a different sense to us. It wasn't the same when you would go there. It wasn't the same openness and sitting down and talking. There was more defensiveness and avoiding of giving us certain information that we had asked for, and we began to worry a little.
Yeah, you realized something wasn't quite right about this project.
Correct.
Now, before you started the project, if I remember correctly, you actually drew up, you anticipated maybe we're going to have some problems, and you drew up some agreements.
Yes, the agreement actually is insisted upon by the British Columbia Conference, and we were sent a copy of other ones that had been done, and we thought the agreement was quite good because it allowed us to do some auditing and control bank accounts and things that would give us some say in where funds went and things like that. And we employed all of those, but there wasn't full cooperation on the other end.
When did you really begin to realize that you had proof that something was wrong here? Who gave you that information? You said, oh, this is not, our money is not being used the way we expected.
I began to be quite suspicious in mid-2016 and began to ask questions and ask for certain documents and details. And at that point, there was stalling and things were just being overlooked. We were not getting the paper information that we wanted. The bank accounts that we were promised and had agreed to have them open had not materialized. And so we began to inquire and investigate further. And honestly, I don't know that we ever got anywhere with that.
But you did talk to one of the builders who was a bit upset about how things had been managed.
Yes, I liked the first builder very much. I'd met him a number of times. And when I went back, and I don't remember the date of this, when I went back one time, there was a different builder. And so after we went over details, I asked the president, I believe, what happened to the other builder, because I just liked him as a person and, would like to have said hello to him or something. And I was told a very interesting statement. I was told that the new builder gave us a much better deal, or offered a much better deal. Well, that sounds good to anybody spending money. But later on, I received a recording from the first builder, which I had to have translated, indicating that he would not cooperate with some of the, I would say, slick methods that some church officers wanted to employ to kind of sideline some funds. The specific document is when there's a completion of a building, for example, a completion certificate has to be filled in with the amounts. And apparently the church officers were requiring the new builder, and I guess the first builder wouldn't cooperate, the new builder to complete those without the funds being filled in, so that the church hierarchy there could fill in that later. And I also found out since that the first builder has never been fully paid, which I am aghast about, because that never should have happened. And anyway, that's something I'm looking forward to, hopefully in the future, because he was badly mistreated. And I received word from the inside over there fairly recently that when he would not cooperate, there have been attempts from, apparently or allegedly, church members to destroy his business.
Oh, that's terrible.
That goes far beyond a disagreement, did I pay you too much, or did you charge me for this? I mean, we expect things like that. But if that is proven true and it is recorded, that is very serious.
Yeah, and what you say there, Rita, is important, because one of the things we need to tell our listeners right now is that something Rita and I and other of my Indian friends have talked about a lot is that it's very hard to get real accurate information from India, even from the church people there. Rumors fly, people go to law against each other. It is very difficult to know for sure. So sometimes we'll say these things, we'll say, we heard that, and we wish we could have it in black and white, but it's very difficult, if not impossible, to ever get that. We hear a lot more things. I have told Rita and others that several times a month, I get stories from India that, yes, if even a bit of it is true, are pretty shocking. Yes. And disturbing, and yet there's no way to pin it down. So we want to make that as a disclaimer as we start here. We're doing our best to find the truth. Now, yes, here in the United States, in our conferences, unions, any of our institutions, if there's some question, it's pretty easy to trigger an audit and say, hey, we've got auditors here, the division, they can come in, we have some questions here. Did you ever try to get good audits for what was going on there?
Oh, very definitely. One of the first things we tried, because of the agreement conditions, was to send in a little team of, local people that are in the know in India that we'd worked with, to do a local audit to see if we could find something that could be simply fixed without making a big stir or making accusations. And they were forbidden to come on campus, which was another red flag for us. Eventually, we did ask for a third-party audit multiple times at all levels, conference, union, division, general conference as well. And they did do what they called an audit. They claimed that GCAS was a separate entity from the general conference, which I have serious trouble with. And one member of GCAS did go to India and went through some of the books, I don't know where all, with two local clerks, showing them little things about fraud investigations and whatnot. That person told me that he was not a fraud investigator. And, I really don't have any report from him, except that later on, when a delegation came to our church that was very unsatisfactory, I was told by GCAS leaders that Oh, yes, they found a few things, but not enough to investigate. And what seems to happen in India, and frankly, all the way up to the GC, is they just don't give us information, and so we're stalled, and we have nothing. And we're trying to be accountable with God's money. When we donate funds, they're no longer ours, and I'm well aware of that. But I still feel a little responsibility to seeing that there's some integrity and accountability when we give funds, especially to a church project, because those funds are no longer ours.
Well, it's not unknown for big institutions of all kinds, companies and churches are not excluded, to kind of close ranks when there are questions being
Yes.
asked, and it's uncomfortable. People don't want to answer those questions. Now, something that I remember us talking about a few years ago that surprised me, and I think surprised you too, is that the land that the Hope Center was built on did not belong to the conference officially and fully, in the sense that we would have a clean title on land here in North America.
Yes, it's actually more than a title problem. Assigned land in India is land that is donated to a village. It's sort of ancestral land that can't be sold, transferred, gifted away, or whatever. It belongs to the local people for them to grow crops on, or whatever. It's a good system for, especially for poor people in poor village areas. It's wonderful. There's a village area right where the Hope Center now stands, and the quote's title, if you want to call it, for this piece of land is inaccurate, which is kind of the least of the problems. But this land that's not supposed to be transferred, in one place it's listed as gifted, another place it's listed as transferred, another place listed as sold. And all of this issue for assigned land, which is very clear in India, should have been known by the engineers and the financial people operating out of the division and union and conference section. Because we didn't have a good title to it, or a valid title, I should say, building permits were not allowed, which of course we were not informed of all of this. Everything was wonderful and moving ahead in all the reports that we got, and we were thankful, and we were appreciating the relationships and on, all those positive things you do when you're doing a development. There was lots of that. But the building permits, because the title was not appropriate, were not able to be obtained from the government. Now, we were not told this, as I mentioned, but the outcropping of this was that when some of this began to come to light, we received a notice later on. It was initially put out in 2015, but we received notice later on that the government intended to come on campus and destroy the buildings because they had not been properly permitted to be built. And
Oh my
this all
goodness.
went back to the fake land sale.
Oh my goodness. Now, when this started coming out, we have an
Mhm.
article which I'll link to here in Adventist Today, where you explained the initial problem in some detail. And I will also put here and share with folks a picture of the Hope Center that we have, as far as much as is there. I don't know if it's ever been completely finished, has it?
I would say it's finished. What is there was finished. We intended to put some kind of a roof or dining hall up. We needed to do a little bit more with roads and things like that. But what was there was operational and being used very well. We did it a step at a time.
Okay. You did try to do what a church hierarchy is supposed to do, and that is to help you track down these problems. So you
Oh, yes.
contacted the division, which is a section of the General Conference. You
Right.
also contacted the General Conference directly. What kind of response did you receive, and have you received, to your desire for more transparency from the General Conference?
Right. We definitely attempted to proceed positively, saying we want things to work better and things like that. There was never an adversarial approach by us, but Our initial approaches within the division and union over there were unsatisfactory. For example, I was told I could write an ad and receive some records, which never showed up. After an initial meeting we'd had with division, union, and section leaders in December of 2016, we wrote and basically we were pretty much cut off at that point. In fact, some of the things that we had said, like where it's wonderful working with you and things are looking good, those came back, were used against us as evidence that nothing was wrong. Now, when we couldn't get anything out of the division, we began to approach the general conference just saying, can you help us with this, or can you give us a steer on that? And we were very much cast aside. Often the response was, I'm sorry, we can't do anything for a month. We asked for months because we're all booked up. We asked to have a number of leaders come to a meeting that we had. We did eventually get some GCAS people there, but the GC report to us was that their meetings and schedules were booked months in ahead and they couldn't help us. We did have a GCAS meeting, and I think they actually saw what we felt had happened. But we really didn't make any progress after that. I can't say that we got any commitments from them. We told them we were after improved integrity and accountability and better treatment for the workers, because the harassment of workers all goes into the picture of how do we control these things over there. And in July of, I'm going to say 2018, I believe it was, it could be wrong on the year, but in July, we sent a very well-composed letter that listed details that we had. And I sent, I don't know, a kilo maybe of documents to be signed for by Ted Wilson at the GC, just saying what the issues were, what we thought could be done to be helpful. It was not adversarial in any way. We wanted things to work better so we could continue, so we could finish the project, all that kind of stuff. And there was no answer at all. And when there was no answer, I was able to achieve a list of all the executive committee members' emails that were on the ex-con at the general conference. So I emailed the letter to each of them. There were 151 of those. I had a few come back, wrong email, whatever. I expected that. But from the 135 that didn't come back, I didn't receive any responses. So meanwhile, I started looking to influential people, division presidents, missionaries that had worked in India that I knew and trusted, people that I'd grown up with, our family had grown up with, that were now special assistants to the president of the General Conference. And the thing most noticeable in most of them was it would start out, oh yes, we believe that what you're saying is possible and that may well have happened. They didn't doubt me. But then the next time I would talk to them, it would be cold and cut off. So something had happened to many of those conversations in between the time I first talked to them and the time I went back to them.
So where do things stand now, Rita?
I don't know. We did hire a lawyer to look at things, and he did begin to file at least a court case, which I don't think has gone anywhere. The reason for the filing was because it was starting to happen that I was being accused of having absconded with the missing funds, which is pretty ludicrous. I could have just kept them home. And I don't think anything much is happening with that. The only thing I have a little hope for is that there's a lay group starting in India that is trying to promote, basically they're anti-corruption, but how far they can get and how fast, I honestly don't know.
Do you have any reason to believe that things have changed in the last few years since you sort of gave up on the Hope Center?
Quite frankly, I would love to think that. Quite frankly, I think they're at least as bad as they were. I don't see any change. In fact, I see one of the things that has happened, the former SUD secretary, very powerful man, very capable man in a very high position, had told me that John Victor Cinta, the president who was at the Hope Center during much of the development, that because of the issues, he would not receive a second term. Generally, there's a 10-year term for a section president over there. And oddly, and this maybe I kind of had a maniacal laugh about this when I heard about it, but he did not receive a second term as section conference president. He was promoted into probably the most powerful position in the Southern Asia division, that of secretary, who does everyone's bidding and oversees treasury and all that. And I just could hardly believe my eyes. The saddest thing to me is the treatment of the workers for those who are crooked to maintain control. The gospel work is being neglected. It's being sidelined for basically money launderers, and nothing is being done to hold these people accountable. You know, forgiveness is available for sure, and I've appealed to them to, you know, use their intelligence and their ability to manipulate situations, to manipulate for the good. And you know, I don't think that has gone anywhere. I wish it had.
The subtext here, and I'm sure
Yes.
people aren't missing it as they're listening, is that the strong suspicion is that there are leaders in the church at various levels who are somehow being personally enriched by this.
Oh, yes.
You and I both receive complaints like that. You and I both met with a group in the Washington, D.C. area talking about this a couple of years ago. And people are deeply concerned. And it would seem to me that being able to, or being willing to look deeply into corruption in India would be a major thing that the church would want to do. That doesn't seem to have really been a big priority. We're going a little long here. Let me say that, let me ask you this. People love to give to projects. That's what got you and your family and your church involved in this. Oh, here's a project that maybe the church couldn't do, but we can do it. We can gather together and we can go directly in. Do you, after having gone through this, have second thoughts about doing projects directly with a mission field? What advice would you give people who say, well, I want to just step in and build this for somebody?
Right. I think there are still needs. I'm aware of some things that I didn't used to be aware of. One was from an Indian gentleman that I've talked to a number of times, who says there's enough funds in India. We don't really need the foreign funds that we, you know, have been getting. And the reason he said that is that the funds coming from overseas are fueling the corruption within the church in India, because they're larger amounts and they can be used or manipulated in some way. Right now, I would say it's unjustifiable to continue with a system where you can't get a third-party audit, where you know things are wrong, where in the name perhaps of protect the church, that evil is allowed and accountability is not insisted on. And what I've personally done, and I'm recommending to other people now, and I know some agencies that are doing this, is to work with agencies who have been through this process and are working in support of the church, but are outside the church and not using the church channels. I believe we need to find ways to continue gospel work in India without using the church channels.
One of my mission friends made this comment, Rita, and I don't know what you think of this, but he said, in projects like this, the problem always seems to be that we want to accumulate more real estate and build more buildings. And he said, buildings are the easiest way for corruption to creep in, rather than funding events or personnel who you can see are actually doing something. I thought that was an interesting observation, that whenever you start buying land and building things, it's easy to take a little money out of there.
Yes, I would certainly agree with that. The gospel work is being neglected. If you buy land and skim from those profits, then you build a church and then you hire people to come in and hold a big event and people aren't trained well. Pretty soon the church is fading and then it is sold and then the land is sold. And when you consider that there are about 5 steps to that and that skimming can occur at every step, it's a big bank account that is available for misuse.
One of the young pastors, this has been a couple of years ago now, but he did a video. He had just graduated from Spicer, and he did a video about going to the area that he had been assigned to, the district he had been assigned to, and founding a couple of the Maranatha-built churches that were being used for cow barns, and his sadness about that, and no church members left. So I think that probably suggests that we need to be more careful about just assuming that if we build something, it's going to work.
Right.
You have written donors who want to know if it's safe to send funds to India. I've suggested that they wait and see how the Hope Center issue is resolved. And sadly, so far, there is no resolution at all.
That's correct.
So, yeah, that's very difficult. I will say again, Rita and I have been talking about this for a long time. We've met together with Indian people. My biggest sadness, Rita, is realizing that there has to be a great deal of corruption going on in some of these mission fields, and it just breaks my heart because I understand completely the temptation. I understand that we are rich in comparison to them, but I also know that that is not the ethics of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
To operate things that way. And it's heartbreaking to see it happen. I receive, I guess because of my friendship with you, notices constantly. And probably one of the biggest things, besides financial corruption, has been the bad treatment of workers.
Yes.
Workers who don't get paid, workers who are fired without any process whatsoever, workers who are harassed and demeaned publicly. And it's very hard to see those things. And not infrequently, Rita, you and I have seen them go into the Times of India and other newspapers, and suddenly there it is, the Seventh Adventist Church or the Seventh Adventist School being shown in front of everybody as being a place where workers are treated very badly. So thank you so much, Rita. Anything more you want to add before we bring this to a close? I just wanted to, again, get people reminded that this is an issue in the church, Rita. This is not something that you can turn your back on. This is something that you, better than anybody, know is going on in the parts of the church where we're hoping to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes, we know there will always be issues and problems. I mean, we have an enemy that loves to see messes like this happen. But I've asked myself 100 times, what could turn this around? Which is what I'm most interested in and what I've been working toward for a long time now. And unless example and directives come from the top and every level on the way down and are insisted upon, this will not change. Every culture has its corruptions. We do too in the West. And unless we deal with those in our church in the West, we will have problems. And I think some of the examples being set by, high church officers are not conducive to making the church run healthfully. And because of that, the gospel is being lessened than it could be because of the example. Like if somebody's cheating the government, why would any government official be interested in the message of that church? And right now there are multiple investigations going on by the Indian government of the Southern Asia division. Where that will end up, I don't know.
Yeah, it should be said that the Indian government and several governments in that part of the world have been for a long time suspicious of Christian proselytizing, and they make it very difficult for Christians to win souls. And this is not helping.
No.
Every time we get a newspaper story that makes us look bad, it doesn't help. So
Mhm.
we're already fighting against a prejudice there, and then not behaving well doesn't help. Rita, I love you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for everything that you've done. And we want to make sure that we do our very best to help our church along the way. And by the way, all of those of you listening, pray for Rita, pray for the work in some of these overseas fields that is just so much more complicated
Yes.
than most people realize. Thanks a lot, Rita.
You're welcome. We love all those people in India, every single one of them.
Absolutely.